Okay, we're live. Hi, Ich.
Hi.
Hello, everybody. My name is Marí Borstlap, and this is my oldest friend in the world, Ignatius Nagel. We have decided to come together to have conscious conversations about whatever feels, I guess, appropriate, or whatever moves in us, or whatever is inspiring us in the moment. And we have not planned anything. We don't really have a massive agenda, which is a bit scary. But we did set the intention when this idea came to me that when we meet, we will do so with focus and intention. And hopefully, when you listen to this conversation, and the idea is to eventually also open the conversation up so that people can ask live questions and we can co-creatively explore consciousness, that these conversations will be a source of guidance, collective remembering of who we really are and why we're here, especially in this time where it's clearly been shown to us that we have to go within. But I also think that we have to gather and that we have to listen. And maybe we can be a source of comfort to each other in this time. I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Yeah, I think the thing that's really fascinating, that's standing out at the moment, is how, even though we're all disconnected by necessity, we're in another sense really connecting through technology, through calls like this, through media. So what felt interesting to me was the idea of not really planning a message or pretending to understand what's going on, but as you said, having a space, connecting, and then seeing what comes up, because I think it's everyone's experience that when you join with an intention, something happens in that interaction between people that wouldn't have happened individually. And so that's interesting and fun and exciting and a bit scary, as you said, but you're really curious to see what happens.
Yeah, me too. Yesterday, I myself had a conversation, obviously, about this idea, and we took quite a while to just explore the notion of it, and we left each other with the intention to see if anything comes up as a starting point. You know, it's almost like we need to drop a pin on a map when we come together like this. And a beautiful prophecy that is in this lovely book called, it's an oracle card deck called Earth Warriors, and it's actually the opening message in the book. Came to me during my sleep time last night, and I actually haven't read it in a while. And then I thought maybe this is a nice way to start off the conversation today, because I can only speak for myself, but I feel a sense of a big shift happening. And this particular piece of writing speaks to that and almost gives us a bit of guidance on how to deal with it. So I'm going to read it to you, and then we'll see where the conversation goes. There is a river flowing now very fast. It is so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid. They will try to hold on to the shore. They will feel they are torn apart and they will suffer greatly. No, the river has its destination. The elders say we must let go of the shore, push off into the middle of the river, keep our eyes open and our heads above water. And I say, see who is in there with you and celebrate. At this time in history, we are to take nothing personally, least of all ourselves. For the moment that we do, our spiritual growth and journey comes to a halt. The time for the lone wolf is over. gather yourselves. Banish the word struggle from your attitude and your vocabulary. All that we do now must be done in a sacred manner and in celebration. We are the ones we've been waiting for. And this was attributed by an unnamed Hopi elder who is part of the Hopi Nation in Orobai, Arizona. Maybe we can just use it as a point of interest to see where it takes us.
Beautiful. I love that. I really felt that. What came to me as you were reading that is the metaphor of the river has always been a really powerful one for me. And actually, I first encountered in Buddhism where the road to enlightenment or self-realization is also described as being a river that you're flowing down, and really it's not that you're controlling that journey or in charge of it in any way. It's more that you're in charge of how you experience that.
Yes.
So you can struggle down the river and get to the end, or you can relax down the river and get to the end, and you'll get there at the same time, because of course the river doesn't change just because you're behaving differently. I always thought that was quite a beautiful reminder to just relax into it.
Yes, and especially in these times, I don't know about you, Ich, but I feel like there has been a build up to this where, for me personally, I've constantly been almost pushed and guided by my own guides and by the environment, but also my connection to surrender and to stop this almost illusion that we have control. And it's hard because we are still human and we need to function in this world. But especially since the beginning of this year, there is this feeling that I mentioned this to you yesterday. Instead of anticipating so much, one must become curious about what is going to happen next. And when we find curiosity in the next moment, it's more like you said, you are in the river, it's going to back to God, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. And you can either struggle or you can be curious and surrender and maybe flip onto your back and see where it takes you. But I also
the image.
Yes.
The image of flipping onto your back is interesting because as you were reading that, I don't know if you've seen those videos of otters when they're floating in a river, they sort of go onto their backs and then they also hold hands.
Oh, that's
which
beautiful.
I always thought is quite cute. So that kind of brought the idea of relaxing, but also connecting with each other, right? Which I thought was
exactly
just kind of a nice image that came to mind.
I love that. Yeah, I really also like the last line. You know, I think there's been a lot of pressure about who's going to come and save us, and is God mad at the world, or are we being punished for whatever? And I love that line that we are the ones we've been waiting for. And I guess there's many ways you can interpret that, but for me personally, I like the idea of taking up a sense of not just responsibility, but once again, excitement at the proposition that if we change our attitude, if we change the way we see ourselves, who we really are, why we are here, what we're supposed to experience, if we loosen up the programming that's been binding us so tightly for so many years, and also many lifetimes, if we can find a way to look inwards, and it's been used, you know, I sometimes struggle with all the so-called new age spiritual terms, but I find that especially in this lockdown situation, whenever I start to feel this feeling of overwhelm or panic, or if I just stop and I breathe and I go deep within, I'm immediately okay. I don't know if that makes sense. I immediately go, of course I can do this. And also, I want to do this. I chose this. I wanted to experience this very unique global phenomena. And it's a pity that we've been using very almost negative words like pandemic and epidemic. And yes, it's serious. And yes, I'm honoring the rules and regulations that's been given to us to keep us safe. But I wish people can also see that there is something greater beyond this that can be unlocked if we are willing.
Yeah, it feels like an invitation is the word that keeps coming to my mind. And I think what's helpful is to realize that just because it's an invitation doesn't mean it isn't also scary and terrifying and serious. So those emotions are valid, and actually holding space for those emotions is incredibly helpful. And as you said, when that arises, when you feel stuck, and when the space is so small, especially here in Amsterdam in this apartment, it's really tiny. There's no garden, and so I sometimes get the sense of, oh, it's really small. But then turning within, that the space within is so vast, and it's a beautiful reminder that we have that at any moment, no matter what's happening. Right? You can just go inside and then firstly hold space for what's happening on the surface, which is fear, is uncertainty, is are we going to survive. I think those are normal human emotions, and we are here to experience those, not to reject them. At least that's how I feel. And I love what you said about curiosity, because part of that flow for me of flowing down the river is also being curious about what's flowing through me. So not just what's flowing past and surrendering to it in the sense of, oh, just let it happen, I'm not going to do anything. It's also surrendering to what's flowing from within outside. And so your flow, what's flowing through you, might be very active, right? It might be, how do I respond? How do I help? What can I do in my community? So the idea that surrender is passive has always been troubling to me. And I think recently it's become clear to me that it's also surrendering to your own deeper nature, whatever that may be.
And I love
so that's
that.
quite beautiful.
Yes, and I love that you mentioned that, because it really ties in very nicely with the intention that we've set when we decided to actually do these conversations. And that was that we really want to come together to remember who we are. And when I say that, I mean that I've been on a journey. I'll call it a spiritual journey, because it's a word that people sort of can understand, even although I feel it lacks, and maybe it's more a consciousness journey. I think that's better. I've been on a conscious journey to try and understand why I'm here, and at some point the understanding was almost swapped out for remembering, because I don't feel it's something you do with your head or your mind. It's rather an allowing, an opening the heart, and an opening to your cosmic identity, to your eternal identity. And if you can find a way to remember that and embody it while you are having this human experience, then this life becomes a whole nother thing. And I think it's a continuous process. I don't think one ever really reaches a point where when it's all done. I don't really think that's how the soul works, or the intention of the soul is to ever be complete. I find that there is this notion of we want to evolve and expand and experience and create continuously. But like you just mentioned, I think this whole idea of to remember what is flowing through us, to allow our divine nature to shine through, to allow the knowledge that is within, that has always been, to actually create opportunities like this, for that to have a voice, to come into the light, and to hopefully then help us remember. And I don't think it's one truth for all. I think it's a very individual experience. But we can hold hands like the two otters in the river while we're going through this experience.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And there's something about opening up and sharing that triggers triggers the memory, I find, you know, almost as you're telling your experience or your story, you become more conscious of it. And what I love about the idea of, you said it's not really just about understanding yourself, because that's very conceptual. I'm reminded of the sort of the Oracle of Delphi supposedly had this slogan, know thyself. And so the word that they used was knowing. And actually the knowing there is related to the word gnosis, which I'm sure lots of people will know is a kind of knowing that's a direct experience, not a conceptual understanding. And so that memory is also, in some sense, just the awareness of really what's happening within you, who you are. It's a theoretical thing, and that's why spiritual, to me, also quite challenging, because it's a conceptual understanding, like, oh, we're spiritual beings. That may or may not be the case. In my experience, something similar to that is true, but giving it a label is almost skipping the experience and just using a word. Whereas what I feel is happening now is really turning inwards, feeling what you're feeling, experiencing what you're experiencing, and allowing that, because then it becomes beautiful and interesting and creative.
Absolutely, allowing. And I think I love what you just said. You know, it's in the shamanic traditions, and I mean, both of us are really interested, you know, as scholars, not just as people who are consciously, you know, on a conscious journey. I think we've both been very we've been active seekers all our lives, trying to like really zoom in on all the different roots and philosophies that's been there for many, many centuries, etc. But one of the things that came through very clearly for me in this past few days that we've been on lockdown, I'm going back to the shamanic tradition, is that it's almost like in the shamanic tradition, you play the drum in order to get to a place where the knowing can happen, because you need a repetitive action for the gate to the knowing to open, because the mind or the ego is a very strong guard of that knowingness, and we've chosen to have this experience as humans. But and then usually once the shaman reaches that state, even although the people are like with the shaman is not experiencing that state, they also have access to that knowingness, because it permeates the consciousness and everybody feels it, everybody experiences it. And there's a little story that I can tell that I always find so beautiful. Elizabeth Gilbert, the writer, shared this in one of her books. I cannot remember which one, but she talked about how in the Arabian deserts, thousands of years ago, the holy priest or the shaman or whatever, the holy man of the village, on full moon, everybody will get together and they had their full moon rituals and they would dance around the fire. And like I just explained, at one particular point, the shaman will then reach that state of knowingness, that complete access to the divine, that connection being made. And in that moment, spontaneously, because of the fact that their religion was Muslim, everybody would start chanting, Allah, 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 you know, God is here, we have access to God. And as time went by, this Allah, Allah, as, you know, Europe was conquered and the infiltration of the Middle East into France, that eventually became Ole, Ole. And when you go to big football matches or even rugby, no one can explain this phenomena, but at one certain point, 50,000 people will just feel that incredible excitement and shared experience of our divine nature, and they will start chanting, Ole, 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 ole. And I thought it was a beautiful story, because it's not just restricted to so-called spiritual practices. We experience this on an everyday level. And why it's a long avenue to get to my point. Last night, I think it's happening across the world, but people clap hands as a way to show their appreciation for all the people working on the front lines at the moment. And in my particular street, we do it at 8 o'clock. And I cannot even talk about it. I get so emotional. So last night we went out and everybody else is, obviously we send on our neighborhood group, we say, okay, we're ready, standing by. And then everybody goes out on their balconies. There's a big flat block in front of my home. And then people start clapping. And in that sound of clapping, of connection, of uniting, I really feel exactly what we're talking about, that knowing that we've always been connected, that God is so present. And last night, a magical thing happened. People opened their gates without any announcement. And we saw the gates opening, and we opened our gate and we walked down. And all of a sudden, everyone was on the pavement, busy clapping, looking at each other. And I realized this is the magic of what is happening right now. Neighbors who's been living next to each other for years, who's never seen each other's faces, are united in a very simple human gesture like this.
That's so beautiful. Yeah,
I was truly moved. Yeah.
What I really love about this story and the previous one that you told is, and this is so deep for me as well, the idea that God is a word that we use for an experience of really being greater than we thought we were and more connected than we thought we were. That it's not just a theory or an external being or a person, but it's that moment where you feel truly connected. And you mentioned the shamanic drumming, which also reminds me of the important role that art and theater and music plays in that. And as a longtime theater director, you know that well, that there's a way in which we can hold space for each other and allow that experience to come forth. We can't force it, of course. You can never really determine whether it'll be there, but if you set the intention and you create the space, you can almost coax it, invite that divine experience in. And I think that's incredibly beautiful that we can do that for each other.
And what I really loved about what you just said is, maybe universally, and maybe we can end our conversation for today with that, this time of being forced to stay home, of being forced to look at our lives in a new way, or maybe just to reach out for the first time in a long time, maybe this space that we are now being forced to create, to hold, is a very excellent way of coaxing spirit to show us, to guide us, to flow through us. And that's very exciting, if you ask me.
It's a real opportunity, being so close to that feeling and just embracing uncertainty, because it's often in that uncertainty, just the little cracks in the personality of not quite knowing what's going on, that deeper knowing can come forth. So it's really beautiful.
Great. Okay, we decided to not go longer than 20 minutes to start out with, just to see if people even get past the first 5. So we will upload this and allow everyone to share it on the platforms that they prefer. It's called Conscious Conversations, and it's an opportunity to, in a co-creative way, remember who we are and to come together with intention. Once we get an idea of what the response is to this, we will let you know beforehand, and then hopefully we can have people ask questions, because we want to try and keep it as natural and as flowing as possible. Thank you very much, Ich, for joining me, my dear friend. I love you and I'm with you, and I also send love and true compassion to everyone out there during this time. May you all find a way, despite everything else, to Every now and then go onto your back and just allow, not just to go down the river, but also to feel what is moving through us.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.